We are at 5 minutes to the top of the hour. I believe Antonio is here already from the New York Service Design Network chapter. Antonio, I'm bringing you on stage. Are you ready? Live from New York.
Hello.
It's not Saturday night.
Okay, so
it's Wednesday night.
the other Antonio is there too. Does he supposed to come up in the screen like he's with his camera?
Yeah, here he comes.
Okay, perfect.
So we have, Jesse Anton, then we have Antonio Iadarola, Iadarola, and then we have Antonio Starino. Is that correct? Did I pronounce it correct?
Yeah. We'll repeat that, but it's good enough.
So we are close enough in namesake. It's a pleasure to have you guys here. Thanks for joining from New York City. A lot going on in your city right now. You'll have all been watching. But we're glad you're taking some time out of your busy days to be with us here at 24 Hours of UX. So I'm just going to do a quick intro for people just joining. If you're just waking up in Brisbane like somebody was and weren't able to make the prior Brisbane talk, or if you're joining from somewhere in the United States or South America where it's still daytime, welcome. This is 24 Hours of UX. We've been going live now for, I can't exactly say how many hours. Somebody will tell me in the chat.
I think it's 14.
But it feels like a long time for me. But it's also been short and fast. We've had so much great content. Just a quick thank you to our sponsors, Adobe XD and UX Testing, along with Big Design Events, Whitespace, and Holistic here in Geneva. We are on Hopin, which is, for those of you who've been around for a couple hours, you know how it works now. If you're not used to it yet, let me just say a few words about it. The sessions are being recorded, so you don't have to worry about that. If those questions come up, I would appreciate if somebody from the audience would just respond back to the person saying, yes, they're being recorded. That's pretty much the most common question of the day. And we will share them at some point. We have to probably chop them up and edit them into bite-sized chunks and get them on a platform like YouTube or something. So we're working on that. This is the main stage where we are streaming live for 24 hours. There are also breakout sessions available on this platform. So each city has one. Most cities are doing their breakout session immediately following their talk. So we just had Buenos Aires. I'm saying that more. I'm so used to saying the French way, Buenos Aires. But we have Buenos Aires, who's doing their talk in the session right now. You can join there if you didn't get your question in, or it wasn't answered satisfactorily. Go ahead and check them out over there. And New York will have the same opportunity after their session, which is beginning right now. So we're Swiss. We're on time. It's right at the top of the hour. Let's go, guys. It's all yours. I give you the floor. And if you need me, I'm going to lurk in the background. But otherwise, you can share your screen using the share screen icon below if you need to do that. And then people will be asking questions in the chat. So perhaps one of you follow that a bit throughout the talk. Does that work for you?
Yeah. I only have a quick question about the questions. So I'm now on the backstage. Do I need to go on the event? No. Okay. Everything is on the backstage, and the question will appear in the chat.
Okay. So there are two.
Yeah.
If you look at the chat, Antonio, there are two. There's a toggle. One of them says backstage, and one of them says event. If you go to event, you'll see what's coming in from the audience. That's
okay.
watching.
So I can click event now, and nothing gonna change except the chat. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah,
okay. Got it.
I'm
on there.
Okay, great.
Thank you so
Have
much.
fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So yeah, hello everybody. It's a bit of a interesting situation. This is great. I mean, it's great to connect with truly the global community of design. We're gonna spend 1 hour talking about the situation and what are the consequences of COVID in UX, specifically talking about how the user experience of spaces, public space, and then in particular working spaces is affected, and how we can really restart, how we can have a positive approach to the new reality. I wanna, just acknowledge for a second that this content is being created before the recent events of social injustice and the reaction of the community here in New York. It's tough times. I don't gonna deny that. So if we need any additional input to how the content that we're generating should even account and shape the recent events that, of course, underlie some more systemic issues, please feel free to let us know, challenge our ideas. We are really here to learn. As a European, North American small design studio, we really want to support the community and everything that is happening in the world. So that's just an acknowledgement that I think it's necessary. And as designer, we really want to take a strong position on that. So I represent here really two groups. One is the Service Design Network, the New York chapter of the Service Design Network, which I co-initiated together with Kathleen and Natalie 2 years ago now. And we are a group that focuses on service design. Our events are pretty, I would say, open and really, we try not to be too technical, but we try to really gather with the community here in New York. We realized 2 years ago that service design was happening in silos, in big organizations here in the US. But we felt a little bit the need of some more grassroots conversations. So really understanding how service design and design in general was happening in different communities and bringing those communities together. So this is really our mission: strengthen service design, making service design accessible to everybody. So check out our social media, and I'll share that after the talk. If you're in New York, of course, let us know. We are always open to take on new event planning and gatherings that come from external perspective. So we really try to be hosts of any conversation that happen in the city. The other side, and that's one of the reasons why also this other Antonio is here, is that we together founded Studio Way 5 years ago. Is a workplace strategy and design studio based in New York and Montreal. Antonio is now in Montreal. So, I mean, this talk is really about mixing a little bit, all our view, our perspective, and our, reflection on the current moment, both from the point of view of community engagement and how design communities are, acting and responding around the world, as well as our work that we carry on with Studio Way. And we mostly work with very large organizations that are also responding somehow to the current situation in a way that was unexpected. And so a lot of solutions, a lot of challenges, and that's what we're going to cover. Yeah, and that's my. So Antonio, do you want to, continue that and
introduce myself?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yes, my name is Antonio, so I guess I'm the other. We made it. We like to make it easy on people, so we decided to found a company because we both have same first name. That's at least what we like to tell people. I'm similar to what Antonio said. I'm based in Montreal. My background has been in design and been, in a sense, a support of the SDN community within New York, but then also working with Antonio around this question around what work is and how does design and the work that we do as designers apply to work. And so my background is much more within the space of service design and user experience, and also organizational development. And so understanding how these things intersect with each other in order to help people work better internally. And that's sort of the basis of the talk that we're going to have today, which is essentially how does that function, or what's design's role in that when we're talking about the radical shifts that we're now take in order to adapt to the conditions of COVID. So I don't know if you want to explain a little bit more about the purpose of the talk, Anto.
Yeah, so as we said, we really want to focus on the transition. We really want to focus on what we are observing in terms of user behavior. And, of course, as we said, we are mostly service designers, and UX, work in tandem with service design. But I think this talk is not about the technical aspect of it. It's really like what are the signals and the challenges that we are observing, and the first reaction, really, because we are really in a moment of really the first reaction to that. And communities around the world are really, and designers as well, are really trying to find solutions, but they are prototypes in a sense, so to speak. And so then also is about what roles behind playing this, and what are the elements that we can bring in the UX discourse in order to really design special experiences that don't gonna be the same of what we thought before. Like workplaces don't gonna be used as they were perceived before, they were conceived before, but somehow there are other elements that needs to come into play to account for the new reality. So that's the focus of the talk. And sorry if it's gonna be a little bit philosophical to a certain extent, or I like to call it like there's this layer of design criticism that I think it's very necessary in UX, because if we stop at the technical, I think the technical content is probably being covered brilliantly by other speakers in this conference. We're just gonna try to think a little bit about outside the box, be provocative, and be a little bit meta. So just bear with us. And it's really a conversation between Antonio and me. We're gonna even challenge each other, even if we work in the same studio. We often have different perspectives. So it's gonna really be a conversation, and hopefully you guys can join and through the chat. And we are really happy to continue the conversation even later. So that's I think that's setting the stage. But the three topics that we're gonna, the three sections are gonna be rethinking the value of end user space in reaction to COVID. How can we redesign the design process and really understand what are the new methods, what are the new approaches to respond to COVID, and then even with your help, with a little bit of interaction with you guys, try to understand and brainstorm a little bit together what are the opportunities.
Cool. Awesome. So do you want to kick me off with the first question, Errol?
Yes. This is not prepared at all. It's not true. We actually did prepare the question. But yeah, I would like you to kind of, guide us through this triangle that you came out with. Because of course, as we said, we are navigating a complex moment, and so I just want you to kind of go through the challenges that you are recognizing in this moment, and
cool.
Giving us a little bit of structure. How can we really shape and form and really understand the problem before we get into reactions and solutions?
Cool. Yeah. So essentially, what are the challenges that we're facing now, having to return to work environments or having to readapt our work environments to COVID? And even though I think a lot of the talks here around UX, we all work. We're all in contexts in which we have to now ourselves figure out our working conditions and adapt to those working conditions. And so there's a unique possibility around us as UX designers to shape those. But eventually, in order to do that, we need to get a bit of a sense of what some of those challenges are. And this is by no means extensive. Similar to what Anto was saying about this being a bit more philosophical or a bit more meta, part of that reason is because it's really new. We have, we're just figuring out how to deal with this in the months to come, and so we can draw on some past knowledge or research, but a lot of what we're building on is being created in action, and so we're sort of starting from that foundational philosophical space in order to understand what to do. But the challenges can look like this, and I sort of ordered it as this pyramid. The challenges sort of scale down in tangibility, but up in complexity. And so if I start with the first challenge that we ended up facing with COVID, spatial. And so the spatial challenge is the one that's the most obvious, right? And so when we're talking about an environment that we're in right now, we're always trying to think about how do we adapt our physical spaces, because it is a health problem in the end. It's physical. The virus spreads through physical means, and so the reorganizing or redesigning our spatial environments, whether that be ensuring that we're working from home or ensuring that the workplaces or our urban environments are redesigned around space, is the urgent prerogative. And so much of the effort and much of the thinking when we ask people or talk to people about designing in a COVID environment ends up being around space. And that's often the first go-to is how do we design or redesign our spaces. And many of the examples we're going to show later in this presentation, or Antonio's going to show, is it have a spatial component towards it. But the underlying aspect of that is also going to be the process. And so how do we redesign the processes in which we're working in? And a lot of those processes are the underlying factors. So, we're designing our spaces in order to be safe, but we're also having to rethink our processes in order to work effectively. And that might mean, understanding how do we collaborate? How do we actually work in a hybrid way? How do we mix working from home, remote, with perhaps future in future contexts, working in and already before COVID, remote work was already opening up the space for what the workspace should be. In the end, maybe a space for collaboration. But now that we're having to actually do that, the questions around process become really important and become very complicated, because many of the issues that people talk about aren't necessarily issues of space or issues of implementing physical things, but they're issues of having to work around the processes. And that comes to the third challenge, transitional. And so the transitional challenges are going to be massive in this. And whereas when you're talking about space and process, those are things that we can more or less think out on paper. Transitional problems is how do we actually move into that environment? And so Antonio and I tend to draw a lot on literature and when it comes to our work. And one of the ones that I think is super important here is actually a paper that was written in 1969, actually. Talks about 4 different change strategies to organizational change. And there's a few of them, but the one that's the most important for us is one that's called environmental adaptive. And that's essentially where you change a person's environment so that they now have to adapt towards it. And that's an effective word that's often used whenever people are moving into completely new office spaces. But now what we're going to end up seeing are people working from home or remote for months on end, perhaps moving back into their workspaces or moving back into different hybrid environments in which they now have to adapt to these new realities. And so how do those transitions happen? We see a lot of workplaces now. In a Canadian context, Shopify was the one that's done it, and there's quite a few, I want to say, the bigger names in tech are starting to do it now, where they're going remote first, or they're basically allowing their entire staff to go remote. And this has been lauded, and in a sense, it's really positive. But the transitions towards that has been so fast. That decision has been so direct that perhaps the transitional consequences of what that actually means over a long term haven't necessarily been thought through or worked through. It's a process that was implemented on paper, but what are the transitional complexities that come here? And finally, and the most importantly, is psychological. And this one's the most complex because it's ultimately the most individual and the most uncontrollable and the least able to be generalizable. there's a really great model of organizational culture that was made by a scholar called Edgar Schein, and he talks about the fact that there, you know, within, if you're looking to study organizational culture, there's 3 different levels you can look at. You know, these are things that we see. The classic example is you know, the ping pong table in a startup that's trying to look hip. And so that's an artifact that we see, that's an artifact that we interact with. Underneath that are the values that artifact tries to communicate. And so those are, you know, we're trying, if I use the ping pong table example, those are, you know, that we're a cool place, that we're hip, we're nice to work at. But then underneath both of those are underlying basic assumptions. And the underlying basic assumptions, if I show on that ping pong example, is that, you know, if I install this table, then that means that's how I can create a cool culture. Which obviously isn't the case, but that's often the basic assumption that comes under those types of implementations. So now we're coming into our work environment. We're going to be faced with artifacts implemented for COVID, processes, posters, guidelines. We're going to be, you know, in a sense, it's going to be very directive, and we're going to be faced with artifacts that have to deal with those. And whereas like the values or the espoused values that are there are really about communicating safety and helping people stay safe, the basic assumptions is that there's a threat and that we need to be protecting against this threat. And so our work environments suddenly become, you know, instead of becoming spaces in which we feel psychologically safe, there's always that low level of threat. And it's a bit different than when we were working from home. You know, the threat is there and we're still scared and we're watching the news, but we're in our homes and there's a comfort there. As we start to transition in between work environments in the future, you know, that transition won't be so safe. Or those reminders will be so present, and there's that weirdness now of being in a meeting room with 3 other people, and you're like, wow, this was like normal three months ago, and now I feel wrong for doing it. But underneath that wrongness is actually still that sense of being, of perhaps being scared or afraid, or having a lot of those feelings that are still there. And so often the mistakes that can be end up making in terms of facing these challenges end up becoming ones in which we prioritize in the processes, because there are things that you can view. And if you look at this almost kind of like an iceberg, you know, that orange line in the middle can be what we actually tangibly see, our processes and our space, things that we interact with and see. Because those are more tangible, we can we might be focusing on that, but in reality, those transitional and psychological elements become something that the foundations that we have to start from. And a lot of it starts from having conversations within our workplaces, making sure that transition isn't just one way, which means like we're communicating directly to people, but it is a two-way conversation in which people are being integrated within work environments that have a say in that conversation. And particularly if we're thinking about things through the lens of UX, have a say in how that design happens, or in a sense, can co-design that alongside us and becomes a collaborative process. And so these are some of the major challenges that I at least I've seen thinking about some of the COVID challenges. There might be a lot more, and I really open it up for your questions or even your suggestions for what other challenges you see on top of these. But they're really heavy challenges, and I think they become heavier if we ignore the psychological conditions that underline them. Yeah, and so what I'm really interested in now, actually thinking about this and thinking about the fact that it is so new, is really around the signals. And now, so I'm wondering if you can walk us through some of the most kind of interesting signals. Some of them don't have to do necessarily with the office environments. They have to do a lot more with our urban environment, but they probably teach us a lot about what we could do in offices as well. So I'm wondering if you can walk us through some of the signals, and I have the first one here. I'm going to bring it up.
Yeah, that's the first image that I choose, and yeah, you're right. I mean, I started from like an analysis and observation of urban environment, an urban environment that is very close to me. This is Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York, USA, and it's a prerogative. It's a bit of an ironic image, but I mean, it's very true. You know, it's very true, and it's very explicative of the current situation. I mean, and I think one of the two keywords that I extracted from seeing these that I saw around me and through social media is this sense of you know, reappropriation of spaces. it's a bit more usual than others. I mean, we are both originated from Italy, and I mean, in Italy, south of Italy in particular, we really live the urban environment. We really kind of, people, go outside, and what's public and what's private and what's used for private use is a bit more flexible. In some other culture, like in North America, this might be like maybe a slightly less common image, but I mean, it's really something. Oh, can you go to the first one?
Yeah. The next one?
It's really, no. Yeah, stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm not touching anything.
Oh, okay. Something changes. But yeah, it's really an image that is common, and I think so. Yeah, reappropriation of space and carving out space out of the environment. It's something that we are experiencing a lot. We are a lot because obviously people are finding solutions. They are trying to make the most of the space, and there's also like a sense of community in this image. And I know that again an haircut is not the most crucial thing that we are missing. But somehow in a routine of a person, it can be something that it can be a relief, or it can kind of help you kind of getting in your space, and it's just something that is functional. And so I think this is a very interesting image for me. I think signal that I extract from a scene like this is that the boundaries between private and public are shifting, are changing, and the public is also becoming maybe a little bit more collective. So of course you need like a social type of agreement to accept something like that. I mean, this is possibly is small business on the street, and people are walking past. It's kind of like in a gray area of if it's allowed or not. But I think because of this sense of togetherness and this sense of, okay, we need to kind of make the most of space we have and make things work that maybe were happening indoor, and now they're happening outdoor because it's just safer. That becomes a very reasonable and acceptable and actually resourceful type of action. And so, yeah, like the moving of this private and public boundary and the sort of social agreement between what's acceptable, I think it's the first signal that I saw and experienced it first. If you go on the second one, that's again happening around the corner. That's my local park. It's called Domino Park. Very nice park on the East River. I think this is great. I think this looks like a very appropriate reaction, and like a moment of community that respect each other, right? So I think what I love about this picture, the intervention to hack the space, and by the way, it's not a hack because that was done by the city government. But it's very gentle, right? It's a very gentle intervention. It's ephemeral. You are not actually blocked by a physical barrier, but somehow that line is really strong in your imaginary because you really understand that define the social distance you have to have with other people in order, to stay safe, in order to keep other people safe. But yet, it actually allows type of communication with other people, and even just staying together in the same zone. I think it's just a powerful moment. And so I think the second signal is of gentle barriers, but it's also this idea of really embedding a degree of wayfinding and information, as you actually were pointing out earlier, on the physical space, and this goes with private and workspace as well. We love to have workspaces that tell much more of a story of how we are supposed to use it. And so I bring in ideas from semiotic and narrative environments that are disciplines that might be actually quite far from design. I mean, they're really foundational of design, but they're not. I mean, they're not so prominent in some discourses. I mean, you don't find them in a UX textbook. as theories. They are really first principles. But I think this idea of what type of signal, well, not signal, what type of signs we can perceive and how we perceive those signs, I think it becomes something very powerful to guide users to use spaces in a way that, again, is safe and it allows the space to be used and to be experienced. It doesn't against anything that is dangerous. So yeah, second signal, semiotic, wayfinding, graphic and visual, really embedded in space. Yeah, this image, I mean, I really don't have a comment on this slide, but I think it was fascinating the fact that, on the bottom you have the IMS video, what's the name of the video? 1 of 10?
Oh, Powers of 10.
Yeah, Powers. And then you have like the view of that different setting of the park. It makes us reflect that those features, those user experience, those new designs of cities and spaces as well, they're gonna shape how cities work. They're gonna shape flows of people, shape things that are so invisible in terms of distribution of space. And then that, I think, kind of is a segue for the next slide, because I think what's up. Can you go to the next?
Yeah, got it.
Sure. Yeah, because I think what's happening in the workspace is that the idea of occupancy, which was one of the most important metrics place design, is really kind of vanishing. Maximizing occupancy is not what should be aimed for now. Like, we should actually maximize occupancy for spaces, because that's actually what caused the problem, right? Like crowded spaces in a post-pandemic situation are not viable, simply. And so the idea of how do we reshape those flows and how do we reshape the utilization of those spaces for very specific purposes, I think is what the workplace design community is trying to elaborate on, try to build on in terms of new ideas. And so I think what the signal is there and what the direction gonna be is really to use workspaces for what I call generative activities. And I'm talking with a lot of, our clients, colleagues that work for other big organizations. Nobody is coming back to the office until 2021, at least in New York City. Some big startups, some companies decide just to take this opportunity to just work from home forever. From home is not from home, so it's not as simple as letting people work from home. You will have to create some rituals, some policies to bring people in a space when it's relevant to be in a space. And those general activities are activities like, simply speaking, brainstorming. I know brainstorming is not the right term, but generating ideas together, having some sort of, moments where en masse we need to gather because there are some relevant communications to do, or some alignment moments, moments where you need collective intelligence to really be there, and maybe the space can add something to it, because maybe you are using this space in a smart way. You have your boards, you have your, post-its or whatever. The interactive system really allow groups to be productive together. But those are very specific moments now. And so I think those moments are the moments here, in a sense, from a user experience perspective. And so, how do we facilitate groups? How do we really orchestrate each single meeting of a team as we were planning a workshop? Things gonna be a little bit less spontaneous, but probably, the idea of design and collaboration gonna be relevant. And again, to design collaboration, you need to go back to another foundational discipline, which is cognitive science. How we process things, how I do that creative exercise by just talking to you instead of by using a prop or a prototype of sketching. All things are available to us in terms of knowledge. And I mean, in the studio, we actually use quite a lot of these things in our sessions with clients. But again, they are not part of the textbooks, so to speak. And so I think there will be a bit more now that, facilitated collaboration become the norm for almost each single use. In this image, you also have a quite provocative Black Mirror image of the heat map. And on the left, you have the new lab here in New York. It's a great incubator. I love that place. And then it's a massive industrial archaeology that was converted into startup incubator, co-working space. And I mentioned that because I was listening to one of their meetup recently, and I think they are amongst the first co-working spaces that are reopening here in New York. So it's first of all a sign of a restart that it's a good news. And also they were coming out with a lot of technological solutions related to their policies. So of course they had to rethink their policies, and they had to kind of rethink their policies supported by technology that would, for instance, check your temperature and then allow you to understand where you are in relation to other members. They open 50% capacity, so of course there's less people in there, but I think this idea of tracking, it's something that of course is a new massive conversation. Governments track for the sake of exposure, and then in those tracking tools will allow to understand if you are too far from a person, where is the flow of people going, what are the areas that are you basically distribute density. And so they're trying to experiment a little bit with those solutions that, and I know there is a lot of sensitivity around that because of the data part. I don't gonna, I think your question about that, but the problem that obviously this layer of technology associated to new policies, associated to the user experience of how you use a co-working space is a new, it's a bit more than just a signal. It's just like a new scenario of different elements in a way that didn't work together before.
Mm-hmm.
You have something to say about the...
It's not that I have... I mean, we have these debates, me and Anto, around the idea of data and the relationship of data analytics within work environments, and I think, and it isn't necessarily to say that the technology itself is inherently bad, but it has the possibility of being misused later on. And so I think one of the things that can come out of COVID, and we see it in some cases, some work environments, are the double-edged sword of adapting to COVID world, which is companies having a license to do things, organizations having a license to do things that they weren't able to do necessarily before. But now under threat, and we can see a lot of cases in which threats were used as an example of pushing through policies that were inherently negative for people much later on. Much of the social injustices we're seeing right now are a consequence of that. In fact, in the case of data, the data in workplaces, there is a space. There has to be a space for large conversation around it, and so this is where the complexity of transitional needs to do. And even though this might actually keep us safe, it might make the user experience around COVID a better one for the individual. The long-term consequences need to be really considered, because there are cases in which people can take advantage of this, and so that's sort of that's always been my take, is how is it being managed, and how is it and how are people being protected, and how will they be protected down the line? It's kind of always the take that I have around this. But it is the realities of what we can do, and suddenly workplace analytics isn't just something to measure occupancy, but it's something that can, quote unquote, keep us safe, or protect or enable workplaces to open in a post-COVID environment. And so it's something to look at, and it's something to use. It's not something to shun necessarily, but it is something to have a conversation about and not be so laissez-faire in terms of implementation.
Yeah, oh, I agree, and I think that brings in an element that is actually super crucial, specifically for co-working environments. And when I say co-working environments, I also mean corporate environments that have some elements of collaborative spaces. So, and which is really the pact with the community. I mean, like technology can tell you, okay, we're just not going to store the data. Like realistically, from a user perspective, you don't know. I mean, you need to trust it, right? So I think that, and it's not is in any way the solution, and I'm not trust. I mean, so it's not the point. But the point is, in the context of work environments, what's happening is that somehow we need to also rethink that sense of community and really work together in terms of what are the trusting mechanisms. And that's not just it's also because, again, if you think about both corporate and co-working industries, you want, like, the value of space won't be to use space on a daily basis, because you won't be able to do that. And so, I mean, we have a client in the Studio Zoo. It's an incubator there in Montreal. They are thinking how to, reopen their co-working and their incubator to, to keep supporting their startups. And I mean, they are thinking, as many other people are thinking, to create some shifts, create some sort of like membership structure where, I go 3 days a week, you go the 3 other days. And so, you have a membership base, but they are not there at the same time. So, I mean, there are solutions like that come from the model, the business model you might have. But then there's this other layer of technology, which is, okay, how do we keep the community together online, on Slack? Just, simply speaking. And I think, it brings us back to the real value of co-working and collaborating in general, which is not having access to the same space, but is generating knowledge and sharing knowledge together. So I think those communities needs to really kind of push on the accelerator of really offering a knowledge base for that community as an extra value proposition, just space. So I think, indirectly by sharing the knowledge and by really kind of, becoming part of the same, even though you are in a co-working with 200 members or something like that, somehow you build that trust. It's a very intangible and unregulated territory, I know, which makes it complicated. Yeah. But my point is that I don't think is regulation the answer. I think the answer is design. I mean, really like strategic design on those issues. It's not an answer at all. We are just opening the conversation here because that's where we are at, and I mean, those are the conversations that we are having with everybody around technology.
Okay. So the second question. If we draw on all these signals and insights that we talk about, and we're thinking about making them actionable, do you want to talk a little bit about this thing that you tell me a little bit about work design, and how you can actually use the idea of design applied to work, or design thinking applied to work, in order to actually shape these work environments?
Yeah, I think more. That's pretty much the knowledge base of our studio. So we are trying to pretend, but we are not very good at that. Yeah, I mean, we say work design and instead of workplace design. I think the idea around all these signals that we are covering and the word that we are trying is really to mix and to combine two elements of work. Is a very complex entity. I mean, work is a human activity, so really the taxonomy of work is complex, and I don't wanna get into that, but I think obviously we talk about work environments as physical and social environments. So it's not just how your space look and feel, but is how do you perceive the space, the social dimension of the space. So how do you feel going to work every day, and that's what's relevant to UX. And so I think really the two elements that what we call work deal is process on one side and space, right? And in workplace design conversation, the idea of space, as you said, there's this type of when we want to experience, we think, okay, what are the perks? What's cool about that workplace that we can include, and then people are more happy because when they take the coffee break, ping pong. But the thing is, like, what happens when they don't take the coffee break? What happens when they when they carry on with their work, with the projects? What happens when they sit down with colleagues and do the work? Do they have the right systems? Do they have the right methods? Do they have processes that they want to use, but there is someone higher up that somehow suggests, if not dictate, the process, because that's like in the structure of the organization how things are supposed to work. And so in work design we look at these things. We look at the governance, so how teams are formed, how do they interact together, how to take decisions, and how individual processes work. How people do research, how people prototype. Research prototype doesn't matter. How people do these things. How do they go from A to B to C to the final goal that they need to achieve? So we look at human interactions and collaboration dynamics, and really we help them to do the work. But then we sort of map these action and activities over the space. Does the space support that? Does the space offer you extra tools when you need the whiteboard? Do you have the whiteboard? I know it's a stupid example, but I mean something that people find in the right room at the right time. So and then it's not about okay, building a room. It's about why the room is not there. Is leadership maybe aware that a design thinking room is needed to certain teams? Do they believe in that? Do they believe in a certain approach versus another? So then you start kind of working up and down in the ladder, and everything becomes very holistic. So yeah, we try to kind of get this observation of all these in the support that we clients. And yeah, I mean, and simply speaking, we divide this process in three very designerly moments: observation and research, where another organization works and team works, and then one is testing. We create spaces, so, piloting times where we test new way of working, and then we only scale the solutions that work. We only scale the dynamics, the patterns that work. I think the way it works very well, because in my industry, I don't really have access to clients, but if I do that in that way through someone else, maybe, maybe that's very valuable to me. And so we try to sort of augment the things in more established processes. So that's our thing.
Should we pass over to the mural or go to the last slide?
I think so, because we have 15 minutes. And I think Anton gonna just jump in, or just notify us that we have 15 minutes to go. So I think it's a good time to, if people are up to it. I don't know how many people we have. I'm assuming we have quite a few people online. Yeah, we just wanna share this. Antonio has a very little interactive exercise. So it's sort of a question and answer. You can also post questions or your insights or your ideas in the chat, but we also prepare a mural board. Do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I have it here. I don't know if can you see my screen?
You can.
Hey,
Hi, Peter. You can also link the link on the chat.
Yeah, you can add.
I just wanted to cool. So
that, and I will pin it to the top of the chat.
Oh,
so
great!
It will remain at the top.
Awesome. So I'm going to put this link here. So what you're looking at is, so this is an anonymous link, and so you don't have to be registered to Mural to interact with it. So don't worry about it. Just click on the nice little button that says "Don't make an account" if you don't have one, or if you have one. So the idea here, and it's really simple. is, you can double click just to post it. And the invitation is, in the circle around mapping. So what do we still need to learn about work environments in this post-COVID world? Like, where does the research have to be? Where does the focus, especially as UX professionals and professionals that might be applying UX to workspaces, put their effort? The second area is test. What are new ideas? What are ideas that you have that can be tested and experimented within work environments? What are things in prototype? What are hacks that we can have? That Dynamo example was really brilliant because it just did a small little intervention, but it created such a huge shift in the experience of a park. And so what are things that we can test? And then scale. Scale are, what are the solutions that we currently know of, things that you've interacted with that we can actually scale and can become adopted widely in different work environments. And the intention with this is really to look at where the knowledge gaps are and how do we actually scale that out. So we're really hoping this becomes a bit of a resource for the wider community to use, and we're going to share this out. We're going to actually have a Medium article that's what we're going to share that talks about all the things that we mentioned today and plus insight here, and it becomes a resource for anyone that wants to start to shift or adapt their workspaces around COVID, around sort of these new COVID environments, and maybe either base themselves off of these research questions or solutions, or starts to implement or scale some of the things that are going to come out from here. And so it's cool. I'm already starting to see a lot of sharing. I would be careful on the size of the post-it, just so like that we have enough space for everyone. But really interesting one so far. Like maybe that's variations, like what do they entail? I think there's a lot of cases I'm seeing about them, but like I think that's an interesting area to look at. Water cooler alternatives, I think that's awesome. I don't know anyone that was really around the water cooler in my life, but the idea of spaces in which people can congregate conversations. I worked in Italy for a few years. We had one space that I worked in had like a time for like tea time, so like 4:30, everyone together and like have like sweets and stuff like that, and that ended up becoming like the water cooler. So what does that look like in post-COVID environments? Elevator safety, individuals' mental health. It's really interesting. What will replace the focus on physical spaces as their importance diminishes? That's interesting too. It's like, how do we, or how does, I would also say, how does the importance of physical spaces shift? Where does the importance lie? Before it was really just on the physical space, but now, where does it, where did that importance shift? Are masks effective at work? That's a good question. Social distancing rules, accessibilities. That's awesome. In terms of some ideas to test, I think VR spaces, that's really interesting. I'm starting to see people use like The Sims or like Minecraft as meeting rooms as alternatives to Zoom, which is kind of an interesting thing to think of. The idea of avatars. And I actually have really fond memories of playing those types of games when I was younger. And so it's kind of an interesting space to think about in our work environments. Labyrinth that we use.
I mean, actually, no.
Yeah, go.
Anto, if I can interject, I think there is some like massive UX opportunity and topic, which is, like the Zoom fatigue, of course. I mean, like we are all exhausted to kind of, work through Zoom or whatever other app that video conferencing app. And I think there are so many things that are off compared to normal conversation and in-present conversation. We were noticing the other day with some friends that when you walk into a room at a conference, you kind of look around and then sort of approach people, overhearing what they're saying. I mean, you kind of have all these kind of, filters to really understand and decide what to do, which you don't have. You don't have if you jump in a conference like this one. And then like when it comes to team meetings and work sessions, the volume is more projected. You need to kind of like be louder. You can't really, I mean, I don't know, I feel strange when I look around because I don't see the screen, because it looks like you're not looking at the screen, whereas in a room it's kind of okay, unless if someone is speaking to you, you don't look. But I mean, there's some body language that also signals that I really am in a rush or I'm tired. Like there are so many things that are missing. The idea of voice, some sort of like voice UX or or the idea of I don't know, just extending the gesture that we can do through those apps now is not there, is unexplored. And I think, I mean, this will also drive technology. I mean, I don't know, because I mean, I don't know, maybe in 2 years we're going to be fine. Hopefully we're going to be fine. But in this pandemic also, you know, exposed the fact that there are some limitations to how we were doing. So even if we'll have a vaccine, doesn't mean that we'll have to go back to because we were flying way too much anyway, and all these things. So I think we can still keep some of these things. I think technology and UX should go in that direction, really kind of exploring other senses. That's for the VR part. I mean, that's yeah. That post-it, I think there's so much behind that post-it.
Yeah. Just gonna check in a little bit more, and then maybe we can jump into any questions people might have. Embodied interaction, that's like, I'm not sure what that is, but that sounds really interesting, the idea. I guess might be even more like virtual embodiment in spaces. That's kind of like crazy. Signage in other languages than English, yes, I think that's an important thing. Like the idea of inclusivity, like we're gonna start to see really interestingly, like a lot of elements that people are, you know, fighting for, protesting for out in the streets, replay out in the design of the systems in a lot of ways. Like, you know, exclusivity it has a huge potential play out here. And so yeah, how do we create solutions that are yeah, really quite sensitive to people's different realities? Even something like if you're talking about like power and privilege online, like having a window into someone's home for some people is absolutely terrifying, because it could really expose, you know, things that they don't want to expose about their lives. And so it's like, how do we balance that? How do we sort of ensure that we are creating, we're not just recreating unjust systems in this transition?
We should take some questions if there are any.
Cool. But this is really cool. Thank you so much.
And then to the chat, basically ongoing research for us, right?
Yeah.
As I said, we work in service design, we work in workplace design. We are not. I mean, we are not holding knowledge here. I mean, we are the holders of this knowledge. It's really like we are trying to kind of gather things and polish that to make it accessible. But it's really an ongoing research that is kind of like in the back. I mean, it's internal to our practice. And so I think that what we will do, I mean, for each public speaking engagement, we try to collect this insight and then put them together in a way that it's shareable. So thank you for that.
Okay, so there's some questions for New York. Okay, maybe we should take.
Oh, this is just, yeah, there was just like.
Oh, okay, now I see. There were some questions that were shared above, actually, though. I was looking through them, so we can also draw on that if you want.
Where the action is. To learn more.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but.
Yeah, so check out the book Where the Action is by Paul Durish.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's very interesting. We are also at MIT in Boston. They are doing. I mean, I know some PhD students that did something about that. Very incredible area, and we are not so technological in our practice, but I think we should look more at that for sure. I give people some time to ask questions if they want to. I just wanna you know, go through this slide. I mean, of course, those are just our contact. You know, if you wanna find events in New York, now we are obviously doing that digitally, so they're accessible to everybody. Our place is really Meetup. I mean, on Meetup, if you know, subscribe to our Meetup, you're really gonna notification on your events. So that's an easy way to engage with us. Also for the Service Design Network, we are Medium posts of our events every time, so you can kind of catch up on what we did in the last year and or two, and you know, get some of the insights that we were lucky to collect through our community. On the right side, we have our very recent rebranding. We launched our new website yesterday, and just if you want, follow us on social media. I used to not to say that, but then people told me, no, you should just kind of say that your social media is not advertising. It's just making people aware that we exist, and that's how you can engage with us. And again, I mean, really just ask us questions. We love receiving questions that make us think.
I'm doing a hack as we're speaking. This is
what we can expect when the epidemic ends, the workplace, the UX design market. So I think in the article, actually, I mentioned that there is something around interface. I mean, if you mean, Juliet, if you mean UX as digital UX, I think even the way we design interfaces will be different. We can, I mean, I don't know, I'm assuming that we'll have to be, we'll have to have some degree of social distancing. So I think interface is supposed to be bigger, or I don't know, like easier to use. And there's a lot of then interactivity also to be worked out. Again, like, we use Mural, the other tools like that, but there's always some limitation to those, right? So, how do you think about UX, not just as the UX of a user, but the UX of a team? Because when you do UX for a team action, the UX of the individual user with the platform, so the connection between the communication between those users. So how do you actually design those two different type of interaction together in a way that is flawless? So that's one thing. One other thing is also, again, do we still gonna have workshop rooms where companies use Post-it? I think that's kind of time to maybe think about how to leverage interaction in a way that you don't enter into a room and you have in a theater with screens and everything. It's kind of crazy. Only there's more human. You use interactive screens and touch point and touch screens and stuff like that.
And scale too. Like right now, we can like point to it living in the real life process right now. Like we shared a link to Mural, about level of interactivity, but now we shared a link to Mural, and people around the world are able to access it and share a bunch of ideas that we're then able to reshare on Medium. And so that kind of fluidity we're able to get with digital is not something that we can really do in physical environments, or at least with physical conferences. It requires a lot of difficulty. And so the best of both worlds become the UX challenge in this, I think.
Cool.
Anto, do you want to talk a little bit about SDN NYC, like the meetup, and just point to that?
Sure. I think the best way is really and sign up there. We are very open to new speakers. So actually, I think this is a great opportunity now. If you are somewhere else and you want to, share something for the New York City or North American community, that's a good time, because everything is digital. You can be anywhere and share with us, which you can do also when we'll be back. This is really the moment to start. Peter, you're here. We are in time. We are both Italian.
Yes.
Finished 2 minutes earlier just to,
appease
destroy
the
the stereotype.
Great job on that. Thank you very much, Antonio and Antonio. Great having you.
For organizing this.
You guys also will be transitioning to your session now. So if you want to talk some more with the New York Service Design Network folks of Antonio and Antonio from the studio, then head over to the sessions and pick out New York, United States. And there you'll be able to join via video as well if they let you in, and have some closer collaborations. All right, thank you both.
And so
thank you.
We also click on sessions, right? And then we go now.
Yes, exactly. You go there as well. You click on sessions and you seek out New York, and just drop us a note on Slack or here on the events if you have any problems with it.
Awesome.
Thank you very
No
much,
accent,
guys, for organizing.
Thank
this.
Thank
It
you,
was
guys.
Incredible. Thank you.
Yes.